been about a week since I played last. I ended up getting the couple of things that I needed to do done, but that doesn't help. The tailspin still happens, and I'm not out of the effects of it, which were, how do I avoid this? Well, I got myself addicted to a really shitty computer game, and that's what I've been doing all week. Basically, sitting in my room in the beauty of summer, just playing something mindless. Which isn't far from what I was doing anyway with the baseball, so it's not really that great a loss. Anyway, come up here, fresh perspective, something I think I hadn't mentioned before, but regarding the sort of default, the no order status here, right? So you have the default defense and you have the no orders. The default defense is essentially a means of falling into defense that you can do sometimes opportunistically. You know, you end your unit's orders, you declare that they're done following their orders or whatever, and boop, you squat down and you're done. I don't remember if you could end orders this way under the original rules. I don't think you could. I don't think after 3 turns you could just say, yep, I'm done. I remember, certainly the way I played it, I remember, oh God, I hope I fail my core attack stoppage check because I just don't want to keep fighting. But again, maybe I was misplaying some things. I don't know, or misremembering now. But under the old system, if you were under no orders, you could defend yourself forever. If you were playing with, I think I may have covered this. If you were playing with the optional defense or written orders, you had 2 turns of being able to defend yourself perfectly well, and then the unit decides to retire. And to me, that was actually sort of the proper way to handle things. You know, we're facing resistance, we have no orders as to holding our position, and I haven't come to an initiative to hold positions, and you need orders for defense. Therefore, yeah, you know, falling back seems like a reasonable thing. And it wasn't, I don't think it was a core with, I don't think it was a core withdrawal. It may have been. Because the problem with core withdrawal is you suffer those stragglers. Now the stragglers feel a lot worse in the older version than they do in this. I don't know why. Maybe because, I don't know, the close combat table is just so massive on this. All right, I'm gonna try to push through. Hope to get this done by the end of the week. To jump back in, not as bad as I thought. The pattern seems to have worn its way in for a bit, but the amount of effort in the turns is still higher than I like. So this turn, we really see the advantage of the French skirmishers in pressing an attack. By being up along here, I got a bunch of morale results. I also had some artillery that was able to engage, and have really weakened that line. So now I can hit it. You know, this is, I think, how the French are supposed to operate. You know, and maybe other armies are too. At a later point, you know, in the war, but it's kind of tough because, well, no, I believe you're able to fire skirmishers both ways. But the thing is that I've got an overwhelming superiority in skirmishers, so I can just degrade their morale levels and pick off some artillery and cause some stragglers, and then either choose to make my close combats while they're weak, which is probably the best thing because that's going to cause casualties. Or if I want ground without cost, I could just keep degrading them and force them back. Also, the closeness of the French units is causing some of the routers to run away further. Not much, you know. I don't know what I wanted to say there. All right. So on the French turn, Davout's corps, the third corps, which is under somebody else now. Don't know who. I don't know who because everybody under his command is a replacement. So he didn't just get a promotion for someone else. Did not halt. They need to roll a 6 or higher right now, which isn't as bad as I thought it would be. With leader down and 1 corps out of 2, but actually 3 gone. It ended up a little better than I thought. I thought it would end up around an 8 or 9. But I tried to be cute here and get everything into really bad shape on that Austrian center column. By doing so, I ended up leaving 2 units sitting there, so I'm probably going to have to close assault. It may not be that bad a thing, but what I should have done was concentrated on making sure this got disorganized, which I could guarantee. And had that happened, it would also drop an artillery piece, and I'd be in much, much better shape advancing into that space. As it stands, I probably don't want to attack that space unless I can do it, at least from the flank, which I can. Cavalry raids permitting. I used the artillery there. I actually fired off 1 shot from over here, but I'm going to stop firing down this line. I only have like 3 shots. It was a bit of a bummer. I ran out of space on here, which is, I'm using, I have a video chip in here, but it doesn't need it. It has its own chip. It has its own memory internally, which is more than sufficient for any reasonable sized video. Unfortunately, mine are not reasonable. But it ran out. Now the weird thing is I can't use the internal memory if there's not a card in there already, and I can only use it when the camera decides it decides which one I use. I have no options on the matter, so I don't know what's going on, but I actually like the internal better. Other than the size limit, there's some kind of connectivity problem, and this is probably the root of everything, when the chip is the working model, and I have to constantly fiddle around when uploading. Anyway, I don't know exactly where I was in my chattering, so you'll have to forgive me. I was in the midst of a thought. I know that. It died. I tried to remember, and I didn't. Luckily, though, I have myself set here and can begin the attacks. But yeah, I'm just going to try to degrade this area. Since terrain doesn't mean anything, it's kind of a weird situation. But routing the enemy means something. Why? Because if I can get my cav to hit routed units, I can butcher the shit out of them. But units that are routing behind a mostly existent line, I'm not going to be able to attack easily. And well, we'll see what happens. We got a couple of attacks coming in here. Paid a price going in against that artillery. I realized I forgot a modifier, and I think I've been forgetting it throughout play, but it's hard to remember how long. Which is, and this is a big one, because I was wondering, wait a minute, shouldn't there be this? Fire against mass targets, basically, columns, cavalry, whatnot. Well, yeah, it's here. There's a +1 for shooting at a whole bunch of stuff. And, it's just, it applies once no matter how many times you achieve it, which I think wasn't the case in the original version. I think in the original version, those were each separate. So if you hit a column that was large, it was big. It was a bigger effect. I can argue one way or the other on that. I'm fine with it either way. But yeah, somehow or another, I was just neglecting that, and I've been doing all this artillery plinking without regard to that. Now, how much of a difference does it make? Well, it makes a big difference, because if we're talking the 1 column to the 2 column, I double the chances of doing a casualty with artillery fire. Both sides were affected by it, but honestly, the French have been sitting in column this whole time. Now, obviously, I wouldn't have stayed that way had that not been the case. So I'm going to say it's been a wash, but it definitely affects things like charging into close combat in column formation. There's reasons you don't want to do that based on, well, where there's artillery involved. But, yeah. All right, I guess, let's see. I think defensive fire happens now. I've already taken the op fire there. I got to be careful up here because I'm in op fire range, but I'm also in range where they can shoot me. Which means maybe it would be best to get out of there. But it certainly would be best not to be sitting in column. But I do a formation change and I give them 2 shots. And that ain't a good idea. I think I just have to eat that fire. Luckily they're getting low on ammo too, so all right. That big bad assault brought a success here. In both cases, I was hitting with French units that could fail on a 1, and only on a 1. Success here, I hit the big Austrian D unit. It is gone now. It's over here. Just vaporized, like 12 losses total from the combat. 3 casualties, 9 stragglers. So it vaporizes. It was a huge unit originally, but it's taken losses before. Kolarov got killed or wounded or something, which I moved him over here so I can keep the command here. If I flung him back with the unit, I wouldn't have the opportunity to stay. I think. I don't know. Again, it's bolting down doesn't work for me. Is the real problem. But the other attack hit here, and again, a 1 in 6 chance of failure against a disorganized, wrecked unit. I mean, this thing was going to break, except the French lost their nerve. They broke, took like 4 real losses and a couple of stragglers. That wrecks the command that went forward there, and yeah, it's a real crapshoot when you do the close combats. Feels like more of one than in the CWB and then the original version. I like it. I don't mind a lot of randomness, and I believe that covers, but throw in enough randomness and you cover some capabilities to game the system too much. However, you really are doing a risk whenever you walk into one of these, if there's any chance that your unit's going to run. And it's a big risk otherwise too, because let's say you've got a good chance of breaking the enemy, and the only place where you don't have a risk is where it's a guaranteed shootout. But if you have a good chance of breaking the enemy, they always have a 1 in 6 chance of standing, which means even if you did your best attempt, you might not get massive loss results that you expected. Plus, the results that actually come from this are also highly varied, which are indicating whether you actually enclosed in with the bayonets or if you just got in there real close with heavy fire. We're at the mechanical stage now of the turn. This thing is still kind of in some doubt, right? It's either going to be a draw because the French losses are approximately in the same area as the coalition losses. I think it's going to be a draw no matter what. But the real question is, am I able to get some cav to take advantage of this breakthrough breaking the line that I've created and actually start capturing some troops and whatnot, or butchering them, however you want to see it. But yeah, it's that kind of situation that gets you a chance to get the high number counts that you want to get. It's being able to launch the cav against routing units, as opposed to some of the coalition cav here, which tried to defend the line that they were on and basically did nothing. They didn't get hurt, but they didn't do anything. They forced this guy into square. I fired my cannons. Yeah, it's just mechanical stuff now. Sorry, because this game it does require a whole hell of a lot. Like, I am picturing, I have to pull the units off that are attacking, spread them all out, check the unit number ID, check its morale state, check its size against the other unit size to decide who gets to roll first. It is just, there's a whole bunch going on mechanically that's far, far more complicated than in that older version. I think the results are worth it, I guess, except that it's getting to the point where the mechanical complexity is so high that if there were, the only thing that saves it is there aren't a lot of close combat type situations. They're a rarity. They are the culmination of an attack rather than, something that you constantly are seeing, which makes sense because the casualties are so high you couldn't sustain them. Coalition turn, they launched a couple of cav up the middle, one to try to take out this artillery. That got countercharged and shoot out, basically. Both units went flying back. Heavier damage to the French, though. And then the other was to remove this threat and hit that disordered unit. Wreck brigade, hit in the rear and disordered. It had a 1 in 6 chance of standing, even though it tried to form square. Demolished completely. Trying to think how many hits. I also killed some of the skirmishers there as well, which is a rarity. Like 3 skirmisher points died as well. So there's like 1 skirmisher point there. And Legrand, who I actually should be making 3 more checks for. I only made 1. Each casualty check, each casualty result, each result that contains casualties requires a check, but he survives all that butchery, and that kind of opens things up here. Now that's Legrand's command, which is also now wrecked. So I think all of 3rd Corps, nope, there's still some cav alive. Yeah, the 1 cav unit took 1 loss too few for that. And I don't know what else needs to move. But I mean, the French attack is just not sufficient to push through this situation. But I might be able to slip some cav in up the gap because the coalition cav just got used on that relatively devastating attack. During the maintenance step, or whatever you want to call it, recoveries, the coalition cav mainly they moved up into place and they recovered from their blown status. So there's quite a few cav there. There's not going to be any kind of easy way for what the French have. If they had their whole French cav corps in play down there, they could probably bust their way through and get at these routers. But they're safe right now. And, you know, some stragglers coming from the skirmisher fire, but nothing too major. I'm beginning to suspect that this is going to actually end up not a draw, just with the amount. I mean, the casualties that just accrued this last turn were painful. I don't know, though. I don't know what the chart is like. We're at almost 140 here to about 120 for the coalition. The French can afford casualties less than the coalition at this point in the war. There's no question of that. We don't have all of the German confederations and whatnot pumping troops in until after this campaign. So, yeah. And certainly Russia's quite large. Well, I think it's over. First thing that could have ended it, I got a loose cannon result, but that ended up on lawn. And I put a little red marker there to remind me because I don't know what orders I'm going to write, but I wanted to do the core talk stoppage first. Do I have an order still waiting? Yeah, I have an additional order coming for Davout. That would be arriving this turn, but he just had his core attack stoppage, which, you know, his unit is not in good shape anymore. So conceivably he could still be launching the attack, but I think I've had enough. That I just want to call it here. Let me think what I'm like. Yeah. I just don't see any capability of progressing further. I am gonna try to handle the withdrawal. You know, the withdrawal is going to be easy. Screw it. There might be some. There's going to be some opportunity fire from that cannon here. This guy, I'll have opportunity fire as well. But, you know, basically we're talking about plinking. There's only 3 shots left. So I could just roll those and count them in. And then I'm just going to calculate out the overall losses and victory conditions, because basically the French are going to fall back. There's going to be some stragglers, but beyond a couple of mechanical aspects that I have to handle, I'm not going to move pieces on the board. I'm just going to roll some dice and then do the calculations. Looking over the victory conditions, you only count losses for brigades that are wrecked containing casualties alone. You get the points if 50% or more of a given formation's brigade using original formations. So I actually don't even have to worry about the straggler effects, which would have been, you know, some skirmishers firing, the retreat, which I'm not going to roll. So yeah, I got basically 3 cannon shots. No brigades on either side are completely wrecked by casualties alone. It's a hard thing to do, and in a one-day battle, I can't see it happening, where anybody would get any points for this kind of thing. I mean, the actual Austerlitz was an extreme situation, but maybe with the Weyrother option or whatever. But it turned out that not a single formation counted as wrecked by the victory conditions. And these are the same victory conditions that the original Austerlitz game gave. So they didn't fiddle with that at all. You basically really have to take a lot of casualties. And because of the way the combat chart works, honestly, even before, but a lot of the casualties you take from close combat are stragglers, like a huge quantity of them, which means that you have units that are wrecked and really can't hold the line anymore, and certainly can't attack, but the recovery rates may have slowed down a little bit. They're such so that in a one-day battle, you won't be able to, bring that unit back in the line in anything like an effective position. So what that means is we were limited to just the victory points off of the casualty chart, which I wrote down. Coalition took losses worth 10 victory points. The French took losses worth 15. So we're looking at a difference of 5 points. That's a draw. Certainly nowhere near what we'd be looking at for the historical situation at all. And I have never seen this game give you anything like the historical Austerlitz. I have never seen the game give you anything that comes that even really is clearly a coalition loss. I've seen where the coalition appears to be winning. With the other 2 times I played it, I felt like they were winning. I don't think I can complete it either time. I'm not sure. But this time I do feel like I came to completion, and part of it is because it's a 2-day battle. Why I may not have completed it. I probably completed it solitaire the one time I did it, and I doubt I came out with much more than a draw. In those cases, I let the coalition form up, as they did historically, set up a set of orders for them to follow. They were fairly complicated because they don't have the command staff, to fix their orders situation. The French do. The French have the capability to react with their good leaders. But sweeping down, things did not, it wasn't a massive victory if it was a coalition victory. And I may have just considered a draw to be a coalition victory. Second time I played it opposed. That time I was doing the same kind of thing, intricate interlocking orders that moved me forward to attack down in the valley, and it was working okay. It wasn't anything great, but I had a coordinated attack, and that worked fine under the old system. This time it feels like every time I attacked, the person who was doing the attacking got their asses handed to them in a worse condition than I had in the first couple, which means that maybe you could get the historical Austerlitz situation out of my capability for launching offensive operations under this game. Here's the thing. My capability for doing so is severely limited because I'm still struggling with core concepts of how to utilize the combined arms and the skirmishers, and how the rules, how to utilize them correctly under the rules. I feel like I was used to the old system enough. It was enough like CWB that I knew how to launch attacks. This newer system is definitely more problematic for me, both because of it's just the complexity of the decision-making cycle that you have to go through. How you position your cav to be able to launch the attacks, etc. Maybe most importantly, how you launch an attack. The fact that the French skirmisher advantage is actually a huge deal. We saw them weakening this line. Had I played their earlier attacks out that way, maybe I would have been in a lot better shape than just charging forward into the close combat and doing the shock that I expected a French army to be able to deliver where it's launching its main attack. Again, you know, I don't know. The newer version of the rules feels like it's more Napoleonic in a lot of ways, but I can't say for sure whether or not there's some flaw, you know, that my play is revealing in the system, because it might be very, very possible for someone who has more experience with it to deploy their attacks in an effective enough fashion. I relatively heavily suspect that because, you know, things are still dawning on me. Anyway, what we saw here was what I thought would be the nightmare scenario, which is the French retaking the heights and, you know, keeping the coalition from being able to launch their effective counterattack. The problem is the French paid such a price taking those heights that they were able to be driven back, and we ended up with just a bloody draw. All right, let's send this one up. Geez. I mean, I want to get to the rest of the series, but I'm also not sure that I can face it. Certainly there's going to be a break in between. All right, up it goes.